Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show today. We have live call-ins going on tonight. It's going to be a little bit of a wild ride. We have a lot to go over tonight. We're looking at probably about maybe hour and a half, maybe 2 hour show. Sorry about being a little bit late. We're 30 minutes behind schedule. We're working on to try to get a fit schedule for y'all, so just bear with us.
By Ukrainian military.
But we also have new updates that they have released, new UFO files on their website. I will be posting that on the channel, so y'all know where to go to find it. Hold on just 1 second. I just gotta find it real quick. There it is. And I will be posting that to the stream. Okay, well, I'm just going to put it in the comment bar. All right, that's saved. That's in the comment bar, so y'all know where it's at. All y'all gotta do is just copy and paste it. Y'all might be able to actually just click on it as well. Yep, you can. So the link to the UFO files are on the bottom of the comments. So if y'all want to go in and read that stuff, it's got some crazy stuff in there, man. I'm not even gonna lie. It's getting weirder and weirder. But anyways, we have some news to go over today. We heard that Trump has rejected the peace deal that Iran has brought to the table. As you can see, we do not have much going on right now in the Middle East. On Libyan side, we did have some strikes last night on live air. We actually had to go over last night because we actually had some live strikes that actually happened. They were drone attacks, and I still have not found out if they was actually from Iran itself or if it was actually from their proxy forces. Also, let me share this real quick. I apologize. Okay. Let me get this. Just trying to get some more people in here, y'all, before we actually get started. Let me get the phone lines open as well. All right, y'all. So phone lines are open. 540-252-81. 540-251-7687. Sorry about that. The number is 540-251-7687. Call in, get heard. Call in, talk about the show. Call in, let me know if y'all hear anything that's going on out there that I'm not actually discussing on the channel, and I will surely look into it. Y'all my eyes and ears out there, y'all. But anyways, let's get to it. Phone lines are open now. I apologize if anybody did try to call while the phone lines was down. I just now opened them up, so they are on. So just wanted to let y'all know, 540-251-7687. We have shout outs to go out right now. Mango, if I butcher this, I apologize. Mango Muzzlin, I appreciate the follow. Rack Manly 9, I appreciate the follow. J-Dag Goatson, Jada, is that? Yeah, Jada Goatson 10, I appreciate the follow. Rowan Mark, appreciate the follow. And Hearn B on YouTube. Definitely appreciate the follow on all y'all. We are on 4 different platforms. We are on YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, and Kick. So if y'all want to actually join on the other channels, y'all are more than welcome. Again, all my channels have their own drawings and own gifts. So don't feel like one channel is getting more than another one, because they don't. We just got to hit our goals. Once we hit our goals, then we're actually going to start the drawings. But further ado, let's get to the news. We have a lot to go over for real today.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and here's that this weekend could be the moment that attacks restart, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around.
So did I not say just the other day that Friday would be the day when all hell is going to break loose in Iran? So for one, they're trying to get the gas prices down a little bit fluctuated. So they're making everybody think that they're going to get a peace deal, but really they're not going to get a peace deal, because Iran will come to the table like, nuclear discussions might be on the table, and then they go back and actually talk to the people that's running the country, and they're like, nah. Then they change their mind, and they just keep doing this constantly. Like it's getting ridiculous. It's almost like the young boy that cried wolf almost.
The world, as we have been able to hear of significant Ukrainian drone attacks that have been able to cause major damage to the Russian port of Novorossiysk. These attacks are as large as the record-breaking attacks that we saw several weeks ago that were able to render the port of Novorossiysk inoperable, and it appears that the second attack is now attempting to destroy and has successfully hit some of the critical infrastructure involved in supplying the port with its oil resources. We've also been able to see some additional secondary attacks within the port area as well, while major Ukrainian drone attacks have also led the Russian Federation to issue an unbelievable announcement. The Russian Federation has declared that the land bridge through the Zaporizhia Oblast is now closed for a limited period of time due to Ukrainian drone attacks conducting strikes on critical infrastructure and logistics within this area, making the region militarily impassable, meaning now that the Kerch Bridge will be the only artery for Russian forces in the Kherson Oblast and in Crimea to be able to receive their critical supplies. At the same time, fuel reserves are dwindling rapidly in the Crimean Oblast, as news has emerged today that most gas stations within Crimea physically do not have any gas or diesel to sell, and it is believed at the moment, with the Russian Federation using a significant amount of civilian contractors to supply the armed forces, that the Russian Federation's army within this area is most likely also deprived of most gas and diesel needed to be able to operate their armed forces, showing that at this moment right now, Russian forces in the Kherson and Crimean Oblasts are most likely in a critical state and are not able to continue any advanced maneuvers or combat operations due to the physical lack of fuel. We've also been able to hear additionally outside of this news in the southern parts of the Russian Federation in occupied Ukraine that the Ukrainian armed forces have also been striking the Russians quite heavily throughout the rest of the country. And we've also seen some pretty shocking developments coming out of Moscow as a result of this today. Moving us on in the Middle East, we also were able to hear of significant developments over the course of this day as the Islamic Republic of Iran has raised the IRGC to the highest alert level possible under the IRGC's alert status register, and we've also seen that they have now issued a NOTAM shutting down the entirety of the western airspace of Iran on into Monday. This has also come at the same time as significant strikes by Israel are being conducted against Hezbollah forces throughout the entirety of Lebanon, and we've also been able to see additionally that within the area of the Strait of Hormuz, it does appear that the United States is still deliberating strikes at this moment, as it does appear that diplomatic talks have once again reached a dead end as usual and are not producing any sort of positive developments for the United States or the Islamic Republic of Iran. GPS spoofing is already being conducted by a myriad of Gulf states, particularly the United Arab Emirates, and we've also seen simultaneously that there is some very interesting developments coming out of Washington, D.C., such as the president's schedule being canceled entirely over the course of this weekend, including him attending one of his son's weddings to be able to stay at the White House, showing that there is a decent possibility that military action may resume possibly sometime over this weekend, although once again, it's never entirely a certainty. We have also been able to hear additionally that the Polish Republic has received its first batch of F-35 Lightning IIs, and we've also seen that the United Kingdom and other NATO forces are currently conducting military exercises using the London Underground as a makeshift shelter to be able to shelter command posts and critical operations of defense forces and air defense forces within NATO in the event of the outbreak of conventional war with the Russian Federation. We've also been able to see additionally that the Ukrainian armed forces and the president of Ukraine have further elaborated on the possible risk of a Russian invasion into the northern borders of Ukraine from the territory of Belarus, and they have stated that this attack will be happening at the most opportune time for a defense, the earliest being autumn, which will be the beginning of the second Rasputitsa of the year, meaning that there is incredibly good news coming out today, at least from Ukrainian intelligence, showing that if any possible offensive is conducted by the Russians, it is most likely going to be during the worst weather inclements of the year for offensive armored operations, which are in the Russian strong suit, even at this point in the war. We have a humongous amount of news to cover over the course of this day, and we are going to be making sure to get through each and every single bit of it, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. And I do have to say, folks, that today we are not short whatsoever of any major breaking news, especially with the Ukrainian drone attacks and the damage that they have caused over the course of the day. And moving us on into that major breaking news, we will be going to the heart of Russia's naval operations and also maritime operations at large, the port of Novorossiysk. Many people on this channel have been greatly familiarized with the port of Novorossiysk over the past few years, but the port of Novorossiysk has never held a precedence or a relevance like it has over the past few years when the war started. During the beginning of the war, the Russian Federation based most, if not all, of its naval and maritime operations out of the port of Sevastopol, as it is the home of the Russian Black Sea Fleet and also has significant port facilities not only for the Russian Navy but for also civilian vessels as well. Over the course of 2022 and 2023, the Ukrainians were able to develop long-range strike drones that were able to eke out enough range back then, a whopping 120 miles, to be able to reach the port of Sevastopol and start causing irreparable damage to the Russian Navy. With the loss of about half of the surface combatants, or the surface combatant vessels of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, a large portion of the Russian Black Sea Fleet was then relocated out of Sevastopol and to the port of Novorossiysk, where they have remained at the Vostochny Rayon up until this day several years later. Not only that, the port of Novorossiysk is a very important one for the Russian economy, as the Russian economy is a monolithic economic structure, operating entirely off of the oil industry being their main source of revenue, and what props up the entire national economy at the end of every waking day. This means that facilities like those at the pumping station and also the oil storage facilities like we can see here at the town of Grushevaya Balka are incredibly important to the Russian Federation's economic abilities, as without these ports and these facilities, they are not able to load oil onto the waiting ships at port and are able to ship these out into the outside world to be able to continue to make money to prop up the Russian economy and to also produce tax revenue for the Russian government to continue to finance its war in Ukraine. This means that the port of Novorossiysk now has a double important purpose of being hit, or a doubly important strategic reason for being hit by the armed forces of Ukraine, as it now serves as a military hub for the Russian Navy and an economic hub for the Russian Federation to be able to ship out its oil. About a month and a half ago, this port was attacked by the armed forces of Ukraine, and significant damage was caused to a Russian Kilo-class submarine within the Vostochny Rayon during that period of the attacks, and also the pumping stations here at the actual port, which load the oil onto the ships. Without that pumping facility, nothing is entirely possible for the Russians at this port. However, there is another important target that we did not really cover the last time, and didn't really seem to be incredibly important until today, and that is the town of Grushovaya Balka, which is directly across this mountain range that makes up the valley that the port of Novorossiysk is within. This is actually a critical oil storage facility, which is used for none other than the oil storage down here at the port of Novorossiysk and the oil pumping station. This facility is actually several hundred feet higher in standard elevation than the actual oil loading port below, and this allows for the oil to actually have some pressure due to it being forced down into the port by gravity, instead of having to use nothing but artificial pumps to be able to store and transfer the oil. This means that Grushovaya Balka is an incredibly critical part strategically of the Russian Federation's oil loading capabilities at the port of Novorossiysk, and the Ukrainians have decided as of today that it will no longer be an operational oil storage facility for the port of Novorossiysk. Ukrainian attacks came in thick on Novorossiysk today. It is estimated that at this moment, around 50 to 70 Ukrainian attack drones were directed at the town of Novorossiysk at a singular instant during the course of this attack, and footage began to emerge once these drones made it to the air defense perimeter around Novorossiysk of the attacks and how they transpired for the Russians. And suffice to say, it didn't go that well. This is just a brief little glimpse of what we were about to be seeing, which is the fire of Grushovaya Balka. But more importantly, there's a lot more footage that came out showing us the disaster and the chaos that unfolded beforehand in the port as the Russians were trying to shoot down most of these attack drones that were coming in. And here is some of the footage, most likely from the east coast of the port, or more so east coast of this little gulf that the port of Novorossiysk is within, letting us see the air defense fire coming from the Vostochny Rayon into the bay, attempting to shoot down these incoming drones. And we hear the air defense fire, and we already see the smoke rising and the fires burning from several prior impacts which look to have hit the pumping station or the Vostochny Rayon, as the Russian air defenses, as usual, are firing across the bay and into the residential buildings across the other side.
Look at that, man. They are firing all over the place, like stuff firing across the whole coast. I mean, that's wild. Look at that.
It's
insane. Got the lasers out.
The famous star shells, which are basically a staple of Novorossiysk at this point. Oddly enough, folks, this one thing that's interesting that we can see or learn about these star shells is that apparently, even still, the port of Novorossiysk does not have night vision devices, or NVDs, or nods, another name for them, that are commonly issued amongst the Russian air defense groups, because star shells and nods can be used together, and in some cases the nods can increase your visibility with nods on when you're looking at the ground, but looking into the air, attempting to shoot down a drone with one of those star shells active could end up leading you to be blinded by your own nods, because they're getting all of that light back in their receptors from that star shell, giving us the understanding that most of these Russian air defenses in the city are most likely blind without these star shells being fired into the bay. We can also see some sort of a puff of smoke here in the middle of the water, which we're unclear as to what caused that, but we can also hear the air defenses continuing to fire in the background.
Hey, y'all, we got a poll going on right now over on YouTube, but if y'all want to answer on the other platforms, just put in 1, 2, 3, or 4 for the first, second, third, and fourth question. Another thing is phone lines are open, y'all. 540-251-7687 if y'all have any questions about the show, or if y'all just want to give a shout out. Make sure y'all tell y'all family members about the show, just so when we do shout out, y'all family members might be watching and they can hear it.
We then got additional footage as well from the western side of the harbor, looking towards the Vostochny Rayon and also the oil pumping station, letting us see some more angles of the air defense fire that was going on within this area. And before we get on into this, we actually have some breaking news coming out of this moment. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so real quick, this is a little bit unusual to cover this right now, but it is something right now that is catching people's attention, it looks like. There's currently a major crisis going on right now in California. Apparently, there's a chemical tank or a chemical facility that's apparently either has blown up or it's about to explode, one or the other. And it looks like it's a 34,000-gallon tank containing something used in plastic manufacturing. And I'm also seeing people say that it's used in manufacturing apparently F-35 canopies as well. That's apparently it's apparently a huge evacuation too. It looks like 40,000 people are currently being evacuated from the area. So that's a pretty big deal happening right now in California.
It looks to have happened in the industrial center of West Anaheim, near to the area of the Joint Forces Training Base Los Alamitos, which we can see right here, just about 2 miles to the west. And at the moment, we do understand that an evacuation has been issued for around 40,000 people that are around this industrial zone, and we can see that there are a large amount of residential suburbs around the area, giving us an idea that this is apparently a significant crisis that is currently unfolding. And unfortunately, this story has developed so quickly, we actually do not know the particular reason as to why this chemical storage tank is ruptured and led to a large release of chemicals apparently used for glazing the canopies of F-35s, not glazing in general, within the area. This is also exceptionally close, mind you all, to Disneyland, which is only about 7 miles to the northeast of this industrial park where the evacuation has been issued at this moment. So we'll be keeping an eye on this story and trying to give you all as many updates as we can, at least for now, on what's going on within this area, but it does appear that there has been a significant ecological disaster and also a threat of toxic fumes being inhaled by the public, and for this reason they're now issuing a mass evacuation. Not really sure how they're going to be handling this. Usually I believe that this would be left to the emergency response teams of the state of California, and we're not really sure what they're going to be doing. When similar sorts of chemical ruptures were seen in East Palestine, Ohio, during a Norfolk Southern Railway derailment where tanks carrying somewhat similar chemicals, but of course quite different when we actually talk about its chemicals in general, however, they actually decided to burn them on location to stop the further spread and seepage of it into the groundwater, which ended up being a very controversial decision. We're not really sure what they're going to be doing in this instance, but we will be keeping an eye on this and giving you all updates as the moments pass. But moving us on out of that major breaking news coming out of West Anaheim at the moment in California, we are going to be returning back into our news out of Novorossiysk in the Russian Federation and the Ukrainian drone attacks that have been conducted over the earlier hours just before we came on air that were absolutely slamming the port and most critical facilities within the area. We can also see here more footage showing the star shell illuminating the sky above in the port. And at the point of this clip, it appears that the air defense had largely gone silent, but fire can visibly be seen somewhere on the western side of the port. We can actually hear
also, by the way, apparently this attack right here was conducted using missiles and drones from the looks of it. So I'm not really sure what missiles were being used in the attack, but it appeared to be some pretty big ones based on the destruction that we saw.
It certainly does appear that they were large. We, unfortunately, folks, never got, I don't think from any of the clips that I saw, any clear footage of a missile being used, but we do know that the BARS missile, which actually does have a pretty decent amount of explosive yield, although it is what we would describe to be a small cruise missile, could have been used, because in prior clips where we saw those being used in Moscow, it appeared that they were fairly quiet and were almost gliding into their targets at the point of the clip. So they may have been gliding in over Novorossiysk, and for that reason, we really didn't get to hear the noise of the engines, and that's why it was very hard to confirm what type of missiles were being used, because nobody was able to hear them to look up and try and visually identify one or film it at a minimum. We also were able to see more of the air defense fire in this clip as well during the ongoing attack. So listen to that. Some classic air defense.
I hear a whole bunch of small arms, but I don't hear missile-based air defenses.
Oh, well, that's real convenient that you mentioned that, Matthew. All that got blown up a month ago. Like, oh, wait, I remember during the last attack when the Ukrainians sent a couple of drones down to this air defense unit down here and literally blew up both of the S-400 batteries? Yeah. We have not seen a single missile air defense system used during this attack by the Russians, so we believe that the only missile-based air defense unit, which was this one in Novorossiysk, is most likely completely out of action, and that's why we didn't see any missile-based air defenses during the course of this attack.
Interesting. That would definitely explain it.
It definitely would explain it without a doubt, and we can see them continuing to fire into the area. We can also see this guy filming himself in the dark, which is very unsettling. Oh, we hear the drone. Man, that's crazy right there. The guy filming himself in the middle of the whole thing, he's trying to get some of that internet clout. He's trying to get on that CIA pack. But moving us on out of that, we've also been able to see more footage of the anti-aircraft fire, once again, from the western side of the coast. But this largely appears to be a duplicate, so we'll be moving on from that one and on into the actual oil pumping terminal area, where we were able to see a little bit more definitive footage showing that the fire had most likely occurred on this area and also on the oil storage tanks over the mountainside. We can see a direct hit right there in this just brief clip, which does appear to be directly on the area of the oil pumping station south of the Vostochny Rayon. This has been a critical target for Ukraine to hit, and since the last attacks, Russia has been able to return this facility to a minimal level of operations, and ships have been documented mooring here at this port, loading with oil, and then leaving the area. So we do understand that this oil pumping facility is back online, and that appears to be the primary reason as to why Ukraine has hit and knocked out this oil pumping station. Additionally, we were able to see some more footage of the air defense fire, this time coming from the northern side of the port, looking south towards the area. Listen to that air defense.
Just nonstop. Like they got the disco lights. They've got are those star shells they fired up?
Yes, those are star shells.
Interesting.
Also notice
I would hate to look out my apartment building at the port and see something like this going on. Like I would probably think about moving out at this point.
Man, you know, a lot of these people are probably having a panic because they're, well, actually, you know, a lot of people in Russia in this town are probably rejoicing, man, because they're probably realizing that the apartment rent per month is probably going to be going down when they have to renew the lease. Like, they're like, yes, bleh, like, you're firing. Every single bullet decreases the price of rent in these apartments probably by 1 ruble. So this is significantly decreasing the rent in these apartments in Novorossiysk. Also note, folks, at this point in the clip, there was a small fire coming from over the mountainside already at this point of the clip, which is showing us that the oil storage facility at Grushevaya Balka had already been hit by the time the air defenses were firing down here near the oil pumping station and the Vostochny, which we can see right there once again, and also the star shells now hitting the water out there in the port, as it sounds like dozens of machine guns are attempting to shoot down the incoming drones. We also have another couple of clips as well showing the hits on the oil depot, or largely the best geolocation that we have at this moment. This clip here does show that fire from over the mountain right there for a brief moment, and we also had this additional clip of a Russian citizen looking directly east across the harbor at those mountains, and we could see the orange glow of the fire there as well. As Exile Nova expertly geolocated, the POV of the camera person is directly within that apartment building and at their direct line of sight, looking across the harbor in those mountains. Chernovaya Balka is right there, meaning that they were looking at the fire that had already been started on the oil storage facility, which we've not been able to directly see in picture evidence yet, but we can confirm by this glowing orange blaze over the mountains that that oil storage facility is most likely heavily on fire at this moment, and this might be a repeat of the Tuapse oil strikes, which also caused irreparable damage to the oil storage facilities in the port of Tuapse.
Also, by the way, apparently a Russian source has just put out some information right now that apparently one of these missiles or one of these drones apparently resulted in a very large fire at an oil depot. And here's what they said. It said the fire occurred on the territory of the oil depot in Novorossiysk due to the fall of UAV debris, which I doubt it's debris. It's probably just a direct hit. So that's what they're saying now. They're also saying that the operational headquarters specified there were no casualties, but, you know, all this stuff's up for debate. That's coming from a Russian source right there. Well, they are confirming that some of the major oil tanks around this location are definitely burning.
And that definitely is a surefire confirmation at this point, folks. We don't even need geolocation anymore. We can confirm that Chernovaya Balka, which is the storage facility, or I'm sorry, Grushevaya Balka, is on fire at this moment. And it appears that from our best geolocations that Exile Nova was able to show on Twitter, it is most likely the central facilities right around here that are also a sub-assembly of the larger pumping station inside the port of Novorossiysk have been hit and are directly on fire. The resulting damage from this this strike could be significant, and it definitely is going to be significant, as pumping facilities are usually some of the most intricate components of these sorts of facilities, and usually the most expensive and timely, I guess you say timely in terms of the cost of time needed to be able to repair them. The fact that the tanks have caught on fire right nearby to this pumping or sub-pumping station right here is giving us a clear indication that the maximum amount of damage has been caused by the Ukrainians, and repairs will most likely take weeks on this facility to be able to get it up to a minimum of operations. We also do not know the extent of how many drones have hit this oil facility and how large sweeping the hits and fires currently are at the moment. All we can see is the fire across the mountain, so we can't really see the base of it, and we can't see how many drone hits have been confirmed that have caused their own fires within the area. But without a doubt at this point, this facility is heavily ablaze and is most likely being seen to have a large amount of damage being inflicted from the resulting fires. And a lot of people at this moment are voicing their opinions on what is going on, in particular with the Russian port of Novorossiysk being hit and the air defense going wild in the harbor as they try and stop the attacks. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this right now, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so as I was watching this one unfold today, all the clips you just saw right there, I was watching and thinking, dang, Ukraine is going in hard yet again on Novorossiysk, which is wild because they just hit it a short while back, which is what the enforcer just mentioned, where they took out a whole bunch of the missile-based air defenses and also just wrecked the port, just like absolutely wrecked it. This appears to be a somewhat larger attack, even at that. And the big deal about this is Novorossiysk is not only a naval port for the Black Sea Fleet, but it's also, more importantly at this point, a major oil export facility. And now we're seeing that the air defense that they have left, which is mainly small arms fire, pretty much went rogue for a large degree. I mean, we saw a whole bunch of shells being fired at their very own city. They were firing it straight down the beaches of the area. Like, it was really just chaos, as you could see in the videos. But what was Ukraine trying to hit? 66% said Ukraine was likely targeting the Russian oil sites primarily, while 19% said Ukraine was targeting the Russian Navy, and 9% said it seems like a 50-50 chance of either of those options. And I am pretty confident that Ukraine is not really worried about the Navy at this point, because, I mean, what really good is the Russian Navy? Not really good for anything at this point. Also, it's been, decimated over the course of years. So they still have a Navy, but that's not the main focus. The Russian oil sites are the main focus, and you might have noticed, like we mentioned, the oil storage depots were definitely struck head on by probably drones or missiles, and now we're seeing them burning, and the Russians themselves even confirmed that. So this is a further campaign against Russian oil, and we're, like the enforcer also mentioned, we're already seeing major gas shortages inside of Crimea. We'll get to that news a little bit later, but it's getting really bad. It's starting to spread across Crimea, and that's because there are so many Ukrainian attacks on the oil inside of Russia that it's finally starting to catch up, and people are starting to feel it. But enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be well within the 66%. The geolocation and also the confirmation by Russian sources is giving us clear indicators that it was the oil facilities that were hit today. The Russian Federation's Navy in Vostochny Raion has been targeted intermittently over the past few years within their moorings, but we have not really seen any significant attacks attempting to destroy the remainder of their service fleet because they haven't really posed that much of a strategic risk throughout the war. Beyond some of the vessels in the Vostochny being used as stationary cruise missile platforms, able to fire cruise missiles at Ukraine, we haven't really seen them being used for much anything else, because whenever the Russians leave the Vostochny Raion, they're scared that there's a Magura sitting right outside of the harbor that might just come in and beeline for any destroyer that makes it out of the Raion. So generally, we haven't seen that the Russian Navy has been a big enough threat strategically for the Ukrainians to allocate resources to targeting and destroying the remnants of the Russian Navy in the Vostochny Raion. However, we have seen that the Ukraine is continuing on with its strategy of economically depriving the Russians to make it to where they can no longer afford the war. This is something that we've seen over months now, actually well over years at this point. The Ukrainians started these attacks in earnest a long time ago, but in the modern day, we have seen that they are attacking and destroying the very ports of egress that the Russians have to be able to ship their oil overseas. We've seen that the port of Tuapse has been attacked, and of course many people will remember the infamous story of Tuapse when those attacks were conducted just several weeks ago, which led to a fire that was so large and so toxic that many people were concerned that the city was going to be enveloped by the toxic smoke and fire. We've also seen that the port of Taman up here has also been attacked as well, which is another significant oil loading port, and Novorossiysk has been attacked several times as well. That's just mentioning the Baltic Sea Russian oil ports. That's not to mention Primorsk and Ust-Luga, which are within the area of the Gulf of Finland, which have also been hit heavily and damaged significantly by prior Ukrainian drone attacks. These attacks again today are once again trying to achieve those same aims of knocking out these oil loading facilities and making sure that the Russians cannot export oil. This puts their oil loading facilities in significant strain. Not only that, it puts the companies that rely on shipping out their oil to make a profit under significant strain of lost profits, which right now, most of these companies are hardly handling the strain and already been conducting mass layoffs and reducing work days over the work weeks to be able to try and stave off the money hemorrhage, which is currently being conducted from the major damage. And a lot of people are wondering, well, how major could the damage really be? It couldn't be that bad. I mean, Gruzhevaya Balka couldn't be a blazing inferno right now as a result of these strikes. Well, we actually have the firm satellite right here to be able to try and take a little look at that. And right now, if we look across the whole of Europe, seems to me like there's just a couple of little fires going on. But let's look at what's going on in Novorossiysk. Oh my God,
Man, the whole thing. I mean, literally the entire facility is on fire. I mean, it looks like even the entrance, like the gate to the thing is even on fire based on that top little part right there. That's crazy. So this entire area, and also, by the way, this is in the hills above Novorossiysk, by the way. So this wasn't accidental. This was definitely a direct intended strike just on that facility right there, that oil terminal. That is wide ranging, to say the least.
Let's see. What would this be described if this was a person that was entering the hospital? I think this is like third-degree burns on 90% of the body, if this thing was a person. Like, the only thing that is not on fire right now is the little rail yard up here on the northern end. That's the only thing that is not on fire. Everything else is burning right now.
Okay, so now that we have a reference point here, because we saw those images earlier from this attack, you saw the glowing over the hill. That was apparently Gruzhevaya. That was apparently what that was. Go grab the Twitter post that OSINT Technical just put out right now, by the way. He actually put the image right next to the firm's data. Go grab that one real quick off of Twitter, because now we have a reference point for what we're looking at. Now we can see it. So there we go. That is the fires up there. What you're seeing is that glowing along the hillside right there. That is Gruzhevaya, the oil terminal that you're seeing on the firm satellite data that's completely on fire. That's literally why it's glowing like that. All of them are on fire.
I'm trying to find the one by Exile. Yeah, actually, Exile Nova already geolocated this earlier, and I was covering it a little bit earlier, but we were able to see that the sight line from this clip, or more so this picture, was clearly lined up from where the camera person was geolocated. They were looking straight at Gruzhevaya Balka and the fire happening over there. And I think, folks, the big question is right now, how major is the fire over the hill? Because I need to show you all this, because this is a very important point right now. It's over the hill, so it's actually over the crest of it. So we're not seeing the base of the fire right now, and considering that there isn't really any populated settlements around Gruzhevaya Balka, we aren't getting any footage of the base of the fire right now to see exactly how many impacts there were. But let me show you all what the actual topography around this area looks like so on Google Earth, so that way we can give you all a better idea of what we're looking at here. So let me see if I can orient this to the north and move us on up to Novorossiysk. Here we are, and let me show you all what this looks like in real life. So if we tilt this down, you can actually see that Gruzhevaya Balka is over the mountain and several hundred feet below the crest in this valley right here. So what we're seeing right now is only the top end of the fire. And honestly, when you think about this, man, you're looking at this, these hills have to be at least 300 or 400 feet higher than where the oil tanks are. So if we're seeing the fire right now above the top of those mountains, and let me show you this here again once more. We are seeing that fire right there, and the fire's base is 400 feet down. That means that the fire columns coming off of this oil facility are at least 400 feet tall at a minimum right now to be able to see them like that.
Yeah, that is something else. I wonder why they decided to put that on the top of a hillside like that. It seems like a strange place to put an oil storage facility. Also, it's like we saw air defense coming from the port, like coming from the areas along the water, but I don't recall really seeing any air defense fire coming out of this location on the side of the hill.
I think we saw some air defense fire coming from down here at the Rayon, but that appears to be the only air defenses they have in the whole city at this point. Is just around the Black Sea Fleet, and they just use that to project over the rest of the port.
That's insane because they put their very, very expensive crude oil storage up here on the side of a hill, and then they don't put any air defense up there on the side of the hill. I mean, it's literally up there, like perched up there like a juicy, perfect target, and they literally put nothing there to protect it. So, I mean, that's top tier Russian for sure.
But, you know, I think here we are. I was wondering. So the reason why they put this over the hill, and this is actually a little interesting, is that if you look at the resting elevation of Gruzhevaya Balka and also the oil loading port, this thing is at a minimum about 200 feet higher up in elevation than the actual port. And the reason why they did this is for affordability reasons, because, you know, when you think about it, a water tank in most municipalities is put on a pedestal several hundred feet above the city, so that way it can be gravity fed. The reason why they've done this is to cut down on the cost and also the power needed for their pumping station. So instead of requiring the pumps to force the oil to the port, they can largely rely on gravity and weaker pumps to be able to get most of the oil down to the area of the port. Because if you look right here, this is actually quite interesting. You can see a little tunnel that they built into the mountain where these pipes enter. And then if you go all the way over here to Gruzhevaya Balka and the pumping station right here, you can actually see those very same pipes making their way into the mountain somewhere around here in that tunnel, and then making their way all the way through this mountain and to the other side to the oil loading port.
Jeez. Is that normal though? Or is that just something that countries that are broke do because they can't afford pumps?
I think this is something that a country that they call like a broke ass does, because I haven't seen anything like this in like Louisiana or Texas.
Yeah, it seems like pumps wouldn't be that bad expensive, but, you know, if it's a country that's sort of low on funds, I guess pumps, you know, maintenance and stuff like that might start adding up quick. So why not perch it right on the top of a hill where it's a juicy target with literally no forces around it? That's even better.
Man, oh my God, man. Hold on, let me see here really quickly. So the resting elevation, if I right click on here somewhere, let's see, get info. This is at an elevation of 273 meters. That would be an elevation of 897 feet above sea level. So let's now go to the top of the mountain, which is right here, and let's get the info from here. So that was about 900 feet down there. What is this? Let's see. Come on, Google Earth. Work with me here. Work with me. Come on. You want to work with me? You don't want to work with me. Why not? Let's see. Come on. I'm right-clicking. It's not wanting to give me the data anymore. Let's see here. Analyze a site. How about, well, it won't. Come on. I mean, that's not right. It gave me the altitude down there. Oh, here we go. So get the info. Oh, my God. So the oil terminal is at an elevation of 900 feet, right? The top of this mountain is at 1,900 feet. So that's actually a 1,000-foot difference between the oil storage facility and the top of the mountain that we're seeing here. So let's put that into perspective. And let's go look at this picture again, right here. That fire has to be 1,000 feet tall to be seen like that over that mountain, because that mountain is 1,000 feet higher than the facility.
Yeah, I think it's an inferno at this point. And that would make sense too, because I mean, you know, looking at that right there, I mean, it's glowing. It also looks overcast. Also, by the way, I just noticed this. I was too busy focusing on the fire. But I mean, what are ghosts and ghouls living in this apartment block up here? I mean, look at this thing. This thing looks like something out of like Fallout 4 or something.
Man, I heard that Scooby-Doo and the gang went into this place and there was some old man haunting his own property and they got his ass arrested. Like, Zoink Scoob, there's tweakers living here. Raggy crocodile. Man. Bro, honestly, man, I think these apartments aren't abandoned. There are people living in them, but, I mean, these are bad. These are Khrushchevkas.
Yeah,
man, rough stuff, honestly. But moving us on out of the Google Earth footage, the firm satellite, and everything else that we have from the port, we can confirm at this point a couple of things. The entirety of the oil loading facility is on fire. The fire tornadoes, basically, from this facility are reaching 1,000 feet into the air at a minimum. And it looks like at the moment, the port of Novorossiysk is probably going to be out of action for months because of how damaging this attack has been. So we can generally scratch Novorossiysk off of the register of an operational oil facility in Russia for the foreseeable future, probably for the next 3 months, I would assume, until they get this thing back into operation. Or they might be lucky. There might be some tanks that are somehow surviving up there in Grushevaya Balka, and they might be able to get the pumping facility up and operational, and in the best case scenario, in about a month. So this facility, at a minimum, is going to be out for a month, and in the best case scenario, it's going to be out for about 3 months to 4. So an incredibly significant hit that the Ukrainians have landed inside of the port. But there's another problem right now that's hitting the Russian Federation. As many of y'all have heard, and many of y'all have been seeing reported on this channel, 25% of Russia's oil refineries have been knocked out at a minimum at this point throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation. Most of these have been knocked out within central Russia, around the Moscow area, or the Moscow military district, but some of them have been knocked out within the Leningrad military district and the southern military district as well. We understand that Russia is hemorrhaging at this point at least 1 million barrels of usable fuel products a day in consumption that they are not able to provide for, meaning that right now there's a significant fuel deficit in the Russian Federation, and we have already seen prior, months ago at the beginning of this year, that fuel shortages were already beginning to reach the far provinces of the Russian Federation and were causing significant amounts of problems. Prices started to skyrocket per liter of gas and diesel, or as they call it in Russia, essence, because that's about all they have left is the essence of decent fuel prices, although that's kind of hitting the United States as well right now. And we're starting to hear that in places like Crimea, it's getting incredibly bad. According to reports today that we have gotten from Russian sources in Crimea, they have stated that currently there are certain logistical difficulties, the reasons for which are known. The government of Sevastopol and the leadership of the Republic of Crimea are doing everything possible to normalize the situation in the shortest possible time. The current situation is as follows. The A10 network gas stations, there is gasoline grades of AI-92 and AI-95, and diesel fuel, but not at all stations. At some TES gas stations, there's 92 gasoline, the delivery of AI-95, and diesel is expected by evening. We are working on this. DT is currently available only by voucher. So you have to have a government-issued voucher to get diesel.
Oh, man, you gotta have that Groupon to go get your diesel off from the station. You gotta have a little coupon with you. This is pretty bad. Like, these never fully came to an end, by the way. Like these shortages, they never fully came to an end, but they are spreading though. They're starting to get more severe inside of Crimea, and I would not be surprised now that we're seeing so many different refineries inside of mainland Russia start to shutter their doors because of these recent attacks by Ukraine. I would not be surprised to see that spread way beyond Crimea. The effects are starting to compound in Crimea pretty quick.
Man, bro, you pull up to a gas station in Crimea, they go, what would you like? I would like diesel, please. Show your voucher. I have 1 shilling. It's like,
man, 1 shilling, man, that ain't get you nothing. You get like maybe a drop.
Man, in this economy, not even a drop. They literally just spit in your gas tank and tell you to get moving. Like, that's all you get for a shilling these days. It's pretty rough. But we also were able to hear as well that they then continued to avoid a rush or a bull run on the gas stations, as last time, we are introducing a measure that has already proven its effectiveness. Fuel sales at TES network gas stations will be limited to 20 liters, which is equivalent to 5 gallons per 1 car or 1 canister until the situation stabilizes. That is, if you arrive by car, you can choose fill up the car or a canister. If you came with a canister, you can also fill it with fuel. I ask everyone to treat the situation with understanding, and especially important, do not create artificial panic. We're working on resolving the issue, and will promptly inform you of any changes. So if you show up to the gas station right now, you can get 5 gallons of gas at, I think it's something like 100 rubles a liter.
I think that's kind of a ripoff.
That's what they call, especially for a country that makes 5 times less on average per citizen than us as median income, that's what they call getting fleeced. I think, like man, before long, man, everybody in Crimea is going to be wearing fleece because of how much they're getting fleeced down at the gas station to get 5 gallons of gas. Also, on top of that, who in the hell is supposed to be able to travel around on 5 gallons of gas? Like, where in the world does that take you? If a car on average gets 20 miles a gallon, say, and you only get 5 gallons, that means that you only have a range in your car of 100 miles per fill-up. You can't get anywhere with that. That's like basically like town commuting, like maybe 5 miles to work and back for a week, or just using that thing as a grocery runner, and that's it. You can't do anything else with that at all.
Yeah. It's tough. It's this entire war here is getting so bad for Russia and affecting their mainland so much that Ukraine's about to basically set the Russians back to the medieval ages before it's over with. They'll be riding around in carriages and bringing back horses and stuff. I mean, it's really getting ugly. I mean, if it's still staying like this and it's getting worse and it's not getting any better. I mean, and remember, folks, we just heard that like several of the central Moscow refineries, virtually all of them to a large degree, have recently shut down because of the recent attacks in central Russia. And that just happened. And that's in addition to all the export terminals getting hit left and right. And also, Novorossiysk was hit again tonight, which is another export terminal. So, yeah, you got to admit, like, it is really phenomenal how Ukraine's ramped up their drone production. You got to imagine, to pull off attacks of this size, virtually daily or nightly, that's wild. That takes a lot of resources to do this nightly. And I would say that proves that Europe and also the UK and these other countries have definitely ramped up their drone production to levels that we've never seen before for Ukraine to pull this off.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, this is rough. Also, man, I like how they whipped out at the end here. Okay, everybody, we're doing well. Don't be a panicking, Blia. Like, bro, they're whipping out the same stuff the U.S. government is doing. Don't panic. Everything is fine, Blia. We're just running out of shit.
They're more worried about people, creating a panic than they are actually fixing the problem. They know they can't fix it. It's like, what are they going to do? Like, stop the drone attacks? You can't stop the drone attacks without starting the war. So, it's like you can't stop it. It's going to continue. The best thing they could do is pretty much pack up and go home, the Russians.
Man, the Russians are out there right now, man. They're going, damn, we can't ship stuff into Crimea because there's not enough diesel and gas. Cut the phone lines. Stop the spread of disinformation. Man, in Russia, man, the people could be starving, but if anybody knows that they're starving, that is the highest priority. Like, that is the highest priority threat, is people knowing how bad it is. If it's bad, that's fine. But if people start talking about how bad it is, then that's where the problem actually exists. The Russian government is here, folks, to fix your problems by telling you that it's not a problem, and if you say it is, they're going to take you to a gulag. They really know how to work it in Russia, making sure to really fix the public's issues by just telling them that it's not an issue, and if they say it is, then you'll be executed. But moving us on out of Crimea, we have also been able to see that Ukraine has been conducting another kind of attack today, one that we can only describe as unbelievable, at least in what it's caused for the Russians. But before we get to that, I want to make sure to talk about this fuel shortage that we've got going on in Crimea. And a lot of people are talking right now about how the Ukrainians are knocking out refineries at such a fast rate. Fuel shortages are becoming a woeful reality of the average day life in the Russian Federation in most places, including in occupied Crimea. And Matthew, what are people thinking right now about the condition and state of these sorts of shortages, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so they're now rationing gasoline, probably worse than ever right now inside of Crimea. And I'm sure in the coming days we'll probably see more of these fuel lines starting to form inside of that area. But now this is as a result of Ukraine finally knocking out so many Russian refineries that they simply cannot manage anymore. The Russians are actually feeling it directly with the gasoline rationing. So how bad is this going to get? 73% said it's going to get very bad. The shortages will almost certainly get worse. 11% said not too bad, Russia will recover as they've done previously, and 8% said it's really being overblown. And it's definitely not being overblown. I'm really surprised it hasn't gotten worse before now, because this isn't the beginning of the attacks. I mean, Ukraine's ramped up their attacks on refineries, but I mean, this isn't new. But I mean, of course, now that we're seeing it get ramped up, we're seeing the rationing start to get extremely severe. But the main sign will be this: the sign that things are getting extremely bad to the point where Russia could be in some actual, existential trouble, is if we start seeing the gasoline shortages reach deep into mainland Russia. If we see that happen, and it goes well beyond Crimea, or like similar we saw about 6 months ago or so, then I think Russia's going to be in a really, really foul shape at that point. And it's coming at a time where Putin's approval rating is already in the dumpster for him, and his authoritarian country, it's in the dumpster. And also, the people inside of Moscow are starting to turn on him because they're starting to get affected daily by these Ukrainian drone attacks. So it's coming at a bad time. This is adding another crisis on top of the Moscow crisis that's already happening. So certainly not good for public opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm with the 73%. The shortage is going to get a lot worse. When shortages like these occur, they are trying their best to be able to conserve fuel resources across the country, but they are still bleeding critical amounts of fuel in places that are not rationing at this moment, which is, at least at this moment, Moscow, St. Petersburg, and a couple of other lucky oblasts and cities in the Russian Federation that are not rationing fuel. This means that they're still seeing a fuel bleed, and the fact that the Ukrainians are knocking out a quarter of all refineries in the country, it's going to be pretty clear that well on into the future, well on in the immediate future, probably in a couple of months, we're probably going to see that fuel rationing is going to hit everywhere in Russia, and critical fuel shortages are going to be a daily fact of life in most parts of the country. So it's not going to be looking all too good for them whatsoever, and honestly, there's just not a lot they can do. They could try and improve their air defenses around these critical facilities, but the Russians at this point had basically attempted to fortify Moscow and Putin's houses, and it basically left everything else to the wolves as far as air defenses go. So that's probably never going to be changing at any point in the future, because we haven't seen it change yet. And so we're thinking that at this point, they're pretty dead set on defending what is pointless to defend, which is just the populated areas of Moscow and Putin's houses. Outside of that, they really don't have any other way to defend or develop a defense against these drones, and so for that reason, this shortage is going to continue to worsen because there's no way that they can stop it at this point. So I hope that does address that the best I can. But there's another thing that Russia is woefully inadequate in being able to defend itself against, and this is something that started to emerge as a new threat as of late, something that hasn't existed throughout most of the war. During the earlier part of the war, when the Crimean Bridge was a major target for the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians were blowing it up in some extent every few months, the Russians started to say, oh, it's okay, comrade, we don't need the Kerch Bridge, we have the land bridge. The land bridge being this occupied area of southern Ukraine that allows for them to just drive right through it to Crimea and to Kherson. So that made the Crimean Bridge not that important, and for that reason, we've never really seen the Ukrainians attack the Kerch Bridge in the modern day, because it's lost a lot of its strategic significance. Not only that, but most of the road traffic and rail traffic that went over the Kerch Bridge for military purposes is now being transported via rail ferry, although all of those have also been destroyed at this point. So most everything has been going over the land bridge to Crimea and Kherson, and this has been about their only supply route. As a matter of fact, the supply route has been so vital that the Russian Federation purpose-built a new railroad main line from Rostov-on-Don and Taganrog through the southern area of Ukraine, through Mariupol and Melitopol, and then into Crimea to be able to connect the Ukrainian railroads that are now occupied to the larger part of the Russian railway infrastructure system, meaning that their military is still able to operate off of their railheads, and that these railheads do not have to cross through the Kerch Strait. They can just cross straight into the land bridge and be able to access the Russian forces and supply them from there. The problem is, however, is that Ukrainian drones, as of late, especially the ones that are able to conduct frontline attacks, have been getting longer and longer in range in loiter time and are able to deliver a larger explosive force onto whatever targets they're attempting to hit. This has now brought the entire mainline railroad that Russia built from Taganrog to Melitopol under attack, and also the Mariupol to Melitopol highway. This highway is the vital artery of the Russian supply lines that exist by road within this area, and there has been a significant amount of attacks that we were able to document just today that were conducted on Russian vehicles traveling the Melitopol to Mariupol highway from Rostov to Crimea. And here is one of those clips actually showing us a Russian driver driving down the road, and in the midst of him driving, a Ukrainian drone pops up out of the blue about 50 miles to 60 miles behind the lines at the highway, singles out a Russian supply truck and hits it and destroys it in the middle of the highway in broad daylight. Here's the clip. When you see the FPV drone right up there, right above the highway, as it's now singling out the vehicle that it's about to attack, it's now losing.
Big FPV drone, by the way. That's a big one.
Man, they are big. Like they're actually pretty sizable and capable of pretty considerable ranges. This is 60 miles behind the lines, and this thing not only was able to get back there, but was able to loiter around to pick a target. We can now see it closing in on the truck just up ahead. There it is, the Ural, and we can see it explode in the tree line right above the Ural.
Damn, that's crazy. That was a big blast off that thing, man. Are you sure that was an FPV? That looked like a fixed wing.
It's an FPV as in it's a first person drone, but it's very different than the ones we see on the front. These are built for extended ranges, so they do have wings, but from what we know, they're also capable of slow speed loitering flights. We don't really know a lot about them. Like, we haven't seen loads of footage, but we have seen, at least in the clips that we're going to be showing today, that they have a decent different iterations of these things. But this one is fixed wing, but still operated like an FPV.
Yeah, I would say it definitely carries a lot more than the FPV, that's for sure. Imagine if that thing had actually gone straight down the truck and didn't get caught in the tree. I mean, that thing would have been finished.
I mean, honestly, man, you can also see this one Russian soldier right here, man. Like, watch this once this car passes. Look at him, he's down there, bro. He's like, bleah. Like, and he's about to start running back to the truck. Look at him, bro. He starts running back to the truck.
Oh, jeez. Oh man, that's wild. They can reach this far behind the lines like that. Like that is crazy.
And look at all these civilian trucks, by the way, that are transporting their own goods through the area. This will become important later, by the way. But when you see the Russians trying to hop back in the Ural, these prize Urals, which there isn't many left of, they don't use these on the front anymore because there's so few of them. And then we can also see another insane clip that, believe it or not, folks, came out from Taganrog. Taganrog is in the Russian Federation, mind you all, and if we measure from the closest area of the front to Taganrog, it is 95 miles to the highway out of Taganrog from the current Ukrainian front line right now, give or take a couple of miles. We were able to see that on this highway, the Ukrainians had attacked and destroyed Russian trucks that were involved in the transportation of supplies and equipment for the Russian army, 95 miles behind the lines.
That is bad. Also, that's very bad, by the way, because as people have pointed out since the beginning of the war, if you don't have good logistics, you cannot fight a proper war. It's just the way it works. If you can't move food, supplies, weapons, ammo in an efficient manner, then it doesn't matter how many men you throw at the problem. It's not going to be fixed because they won't have ammo to fight with, and they won't have food either. They'll be basically starving while they're fighting. So, I mean, this is literally getting at the root of the problem that Ukraine's going for with this one. Instead of just fighting the troops head on, they're actually just going back to the root and literally catching all the supplies before they even get to the front. So that's really bad.
As Napoleon once said, an army marches on its stomach, which back in the day was a pretty true claim. It still is, because people have to eat. But soldiers also have to have bullets to shoot, shells to fire, and also vital equipment to be able to keep up their combat operations outside of engaging in fighting the enemy, which involves everything with normal life. And the fact that the Ukrainians are now hitting Russian supply trucks 100 miles from the front is making it to where Russia is completely incapable of protecting and fortifying their supply lines. In recent years, we have seen that drones were able to reach about 20 and 30 miles behind the lines, which were already becoming a major threat, but the Russians were able to try and mitigate some of the threat by building drone net roadways in the area to where the roadways were protected by large nets that covered the entirety of their length, which would stop most Ukrainian drones from being able to hit the vehicles until those nets were burned or destroyed enough to where they cease to exist, and then they get attacked through the gaps. Now we're seeing that the Ukrainians have such a long attack range, Russia would either have to fortify and protect every single road within this area, the thousands of miles of them, all the way from the front to 100 miles away to Taganrog, which they cannot do, or they're just going to have to accept that most of their supplies are going to be destroyed before they even make it close to the front, which is going to be increasing the amount of logistical inefficiency because most of the supply tonnage is not even going to be getting close to the front. So that means that also the amount of supply trucks and vehicles that can be destroyed is far larger because the Ukrainians also have a much wider catchment area. This is going to be causing critical failings for the Russian Federation's armed forces within Kherson and Crimea, which are entirely relying on this land corridor right now to be able to get supplies. Also, I have to point out, folks, that even in the modern day, the Russian army has a critical shortcoming. And the critical shortcoming is that the Russian army does not have a built-in logistics force like the US or Western militaries have here in NATO. In NATO, we bake into the force structure a large logistical component. And this is what keeps our armed forces running. From the very moment that the Army receives the supplies here in the United States, it is handled by one of the armed forces all the way to the point that it's distributed to the frontline troops or frontline sailors on a ship, the troops on land, or the airmen at the air bases overseas, meaning that we have complete and total control over our logistics. On the other hand, Russia does not have that kind of built-in logistics force even now. At the beginning of the war, they didn't have it. And how Russia deals with that is by hiring out civilian contractors, which is absolutely insane. And the civilian contractors have it written into their contracts, and we've seen that they have exercised these clauses a million times in the war, that they will not deliver supplies to places that are hard to reach or dangerous for their employees. And we have seen that that has caused huge issues because most of the Russians' logistics, somewhere around 60%, is handled almost entirely by civilian contractors, almost all the way up to the front line itself. And most of the time, it'll never get dropped off directly at the front. They have to drop it off somewhere way far behind, to where the front line unit has to retreat, basically, grab the equipment, and then bring it back up for the rest of the unit. So right now, we're understanding that the Russian government, because of the fact that civilian contractors are now finding the risk too great to ship the Russian military's equipment into Kherson and Crimea, have issued the following decree today. This is the original decree right here, by the way, in Russian. This is the English translated decree, which we'll be reading for you all in full. In accordance with paragraph 368 of the decree of the President of the Russian Federation on October 19, 2022, number 757, on measures taken in the constituent entities of the Russian Federation in connection with the decree of the Russian Federation of October 19, 2022, number 756, in order to ensure the safety of transit road transport through the territory of the Kherson region. The President of Russia has decreed, or generally the authorities have decreed, to introduce a temporary restriction on the movement of freight vehicles on the section of the Federal Republic Highway number 280, Novorossiysk, from kilometer 463 to 300 kilometer, and from 494 kilometer to 0 in the direction of the Dzhankoy automobile checkpoint from 0000 on the 21st of May of the year until further notice, with the exception of freight vehicles carrying military cargo, special cargo, essential pharmaceutical products, as well as equipment for infrastructure and restoration, gasoline, diesel, and other types of fuel, and perishable goods in accordance with Appendix number 1 to this decree. 1.4 certain types of socially significant essential food products in accordance with Appendix number 2 to this decree. This means that most Russian civilian contractors are probably about to get axed out of the Berdyansk highway, because Highway 280 right now, as it's called, is actually the one that goes from Mariupol to Melitopol, and from Melitopol into the area of Kherson, which is on the M14, as it's called by the Ukrainian armed forces. So that means that right now, the most important highway for ground transportation in this area is about to get shut down completely. It's already been partially shut down right now. It's probably about to get shut down to the civilian contractors here soon, because the civilian contractors are probably going to use this decree as a reason to explain that it's now too dangerous for their employees to travel this route, and they're not going to be delivering the supplies any longer. This is almost becoming a complete collapse of the Russian supply lines, and a lot of people are actually talking about that at this moment right now in the poll. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so this is actually a pretty big story right here. I've not seen too many people talking about it today, but I mean, this is a very big deal because if logistics start to become troubled inside of Russia in the occupied territories, that could hamper all the frontline efforts, literally from the top to bottom. So now we're seeing that Russia has suspended all traffic on the main highway that we were just talking about due to recent strikes. What do you think is going to happen as a result of that? 63% said Russian logistics have essentially failed at this point, and that they're trying to basically pick up the pieces. 18% said Russia will find a new route soon, and 13% said Russia will install drone nets very soon, and that'll fix their problem. So Russia has been installing drone nets. That is not really working the way they hoped it would work. And also, by the way, these drones that are coming in have such large payloads and are heavier drones. They're not just normal FPVs. They're larger ones like we just saw a moment ago. They're fixed-wing aircraft. They're able to generally penetrate some of the drone nets, so that's not really working that well. Also, there's really not a new route to pick because they picked that route because it was the easiest one to get from point A to B to get the supplies to the troops. So there's really not a new route to pick. So I would say at this point, Russian logistics have essentially failed along this area, and I don't really see how they're going to fix it because they really weren't expecting Ukraine.
Now and just now we have 5 alerts going on vessels at the Hormuz Strait right now. Not quite sure about what's going on with these alerts. They are just now happening right now as we speak. Not for sure if ships are dispatching a stress signal right now, or if they're just having ship issues because of being at anchor for so long. I don't know. I'm not for sure. This is new. We will keep y'all posted and up to date about what's going on with this situation. But as of right now, like I said, we have 5 alerts right now that's giving off stress signals from cargo ships. Not for sure if they're actually cargo ships or if they're just regular vessels. These could be Navy ships that's sending out distress signals right now, y'all. So let's keep an eye on this, and we will get back to this as soon as we can. Okay, we do have reports coming in right now that Iran's airspace has now become closed. So we already knew that, but the Iran military has declared maximum alert status. Heavy fighter jets, which not sure what that means, has been detected in northern Iraq, with fighter aircraft seen flying in the airspace. GPS jamming has been reported in Qatar and Kuwait. So they have been trying to conduct jamming to the area. So I guess they're trying to jam the air signals and airways so they can actually, they think it actually going to deter the United States forces or Israel from flying around. But their jamming systems are so old. They just need to stop it and just go ahead and give up. Take the free ride and go to Russia. Just saying. They better take the free ride when they got it. Because it wouldn't just close it really fast. I mean, Friday it's going to be a wild day. It could happen this weekend. It could happen this weekend. But I'm thinking that's probably going Friday.
To be able to hit their logistics trucks this far back behind the lines, and they really didn't prepare for it, which is also very Russian, by the way. They don't prepare for any contingencies to a large degree, but this was one right here that you didn't want to ignore, because if your logistics fail, your front line efforts are going to fail. So I think we're going to start seeing a very gradual weakening along the front as the forces are not getting probably...
And even then, it could be attacked at any point by a drone and destroyed before it even makes it a couple of miles from the front. It could be 90 miles away and get hit by another drone and then completely knocked out and destroyed. This is making the situation untenable for the Russian army supply-wise, particularly right now within Kherson, which is a very important front to speak of, and the Zaporizhzhia region. This area is where the Surovikin line is that the Russians set up way back in 2023 during the Ukrainian summer offensive, and if the Ukrainians are ever able to outmaneuver or are able to emphasize superior firepower doctrine against the Russians and suppress them and then isolate them and destroy them in detail, they may be able to break through and start racing rapidly towards Crimea. And once Crimea ends up being cut off from the land bridge, which is really their last hope even in the current state that they're in right now, there isn't really any effective route of retreat for the Russian forces left in Crimea, unless the Ukrainians somehow stopped right at the Chonhar and Ornyansk gap and allowed the Russians to slowly retreat with their forces across the strait and back into Russia, which is probably what would end up happening, because these areas of the Ornyansk and Chonhar gap are pretty significant bottlenecks, so it'd probably take a time for the Ukrainians to be able to get through that. Still, it is showing that Russian logistics have failed, and within the particular area that they are failing the worst, this could lead to the Ukrainians having a windfall battlefield success against the Russian Federation in some sort of a future offensive. But with that, I hope we've addressed this story well, which I have to say, folks, is an unbelievably major one in its implications for what might happen to the Russian army within this area. And I have to say, positive news like this good, has not come out in a while. But we're going to be moving on for a little while.
So we have confirmation that UAE F-22 Raptors has just wiped an Iranian military base off the map. Airstrikes has been confirmed from the UAE on Iranian IRGC bases in Iran. Not quite sure exactly where at, but it is some of the bases that's out over in Iran. So that is breaking news. It's just coming in. Just want to keep y'all posted about what's going on. Another thing is Donald Trump has arrived back in D.C. 4 hours ago from canceling all of his scheduled meetings. So not for sure about what's going on, but they are definitely hauling butt back to the White House. So not for sure about exactly what that is all about, but they are having a heavily military escort back to the White House. Okay, pull that up on screen for y'all so y'all can see. I'm not 100% sure if he rides around with that many Secret Service and military officials, but that was a lot. They was hauling butt, and they had the road shut down to wherever he was going. So I believe he was on the way to the White House. Let me just check that. It don't say it; just says that he was on the way to the White House and canceled all his plans from New Jersey. So, I mean, we're going to see what's going on. We're going to try to keep up to date and keep you all up to date about what's going on. So,
out of Europe and on into the Middle East. I'll also cover some of the news that we have been able to hear out of the Iran war today, and we have some pretty big news coming out of that area. But before we move on into that news, I do want to say a humongous thanks to everybody who has been watching the stream so far tonight. Over the course of the night, we have had a peak viewership of 15.6 thousand people over the course of this entire stream, and 60,000 people have watched in the first hour in 10 minutes. And I'm going to say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative of so many of y'all continue to come here and get your news from this channel. We're very honored to know that a lot of y'all consider this channel to be a primary source of news, and I hope that tonight we've been able to make sure that our news and analysis has been top-notch and high rate, at least in terms of the kind of news we're covering, and the analysis and background behind each piece of news and what it means in the bigger picture, because we pride ourselves greatly on trying to provide the highest quality news that y'all are able to hear.
And just to let y'all know, the call lines are open, 540-251-7687. Call in, get your voice heard. If y'all just want to call in and talk about the show,
of
go
what's
ahead.
going on
If
the
y'all have
ground.
something on your mind,
Before
you
we
want to
move
go
on
ahead.
into the
If you
rest
want
of the
to
news,
call
I do
in,
want to take a quick
send
minute
shout out to you.
to get to thank y'all for y'all's time being here, like we just did, and also answer a couple of questions. We're going to be taking 3 from the chat, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news from around the world, from the Middle East, from the United States, which is basically all one big story, and then also all the rest of the news that we got out of Europe today and the war in Ukraine. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so let's jump into our first super chat, which goes to none other than Chillin Kavakin. And thank you very much, Chillin, for that.
They have a very competent nuclear defensive force as well, with about 400 nuclear warheads. So they could definitely respond. The problem is, though, would they? And also, would they have a lot of international support? Because France would probably be willing to make a response to that and also threaten the Russians within an inch of their life to not even take that sort of an action. But they would probably only do that if they had enough international support from the other European states that are either quite significant economically and militarily, or they're nuclear armed like Britain. And I don't really know how that would go, because to be entirely honest, Schumer's government in Britain says a lot of things that sound pretty good when it comes to foreign policy, but follow-through is non-existent, unfortunately. We've seen that there's been a lot of strong statements that sounded very good in practice, like Britain was going to start intercepting Russian shadow tankers near Britain's waters and just seizing them outright, and then once the Russians showed them down in the English Channel, they've completely backed off of that and didn't follow through whatsoever. So it's really unclear whether the British will follow through, because they say a lot of good things, but follow through on almost none of them. Germany and Poland would probably follow along, but they're not nuclear armed. They're just well-armed conventionally, and also pretty significant economic players within Europe at this moment, but beyond that, they're not nuclear armed, so they'd still be leaning on France for the nuclear muscle if it ever came down to that. So I would say generally there is a chance, but it relies on the last-minute decision in the central leadership of most European nations that would see if any kind of a response would ever actually be given. So I think that's about the best answer I could give to that question. It's actually a pretty in-depth one, and it's hard to gauge a final answer, and that's why I'm kind of having to hedge the claims on if this happens and if that happens, this might happen, because right now we're not seeing clear answers from anyone that are being followed through with significantly from anywhere in the world, in the United States, or even in Europe. So it really rely on the last-minute decision of these leaders, which is very hard to guess, because it could be a 50-50 and go either way. So I hope that does answer the question the best I can, considering all those variables, and humongous thanks to you so much once again for supporting the channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you who went out of your way to support this channel, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible to be on air every night and keep our lights on, to keep these computers running, and we also wouldn't be able to make it possible for the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who watch every month to be able to consider this channel their primary source of news. So a big thanks to your radicals, which is something that I kind of find funny, because a lot of people will always say, well, not a lot, but some people say in the chat, oh, you're working on what ifs and hypotheticals. It's like, well, that's analysis. Like if we ever had an answer where we're like, this is 100% what's going to happen, we're bullshit artists at that point, because there's no way to say 100% that anything's ever going to happen. It's always in percentage chances. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping the channel keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you and your support, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to try and give the most accurate news that we can to all of y'all who are watching right now. So humongous thanks to you so much for creating units. And we actually see this one here, Darwin Troll, so about
Logic. But unfortunately, what's that you?
I have to say that they probably would be stupid enough to do something like that. We thought that it would be absolutely stupid beyond belief for them to just start attacking random countries in the Middle East. Yet they did. Like, I remember at the beginning I remember before the war started when they were threatening that, you and me, I think we're on there going, that would be absolutely stupid if they did that. Like, we don't know if they would, but it would really be a dumb thing to do, and then they ended up attacking literally everybody they could in the Middle East. So there is a possibility that they could follow through with this threat, considering they follow through with that one, and they could attack Europe. And a lot of people are saying, well, the Europeans are weak, feeble. They wouldn't declare Article 5 or something like that. Well, I mean, if a missile lands in Munich and kills 30 German civilians, there's really no other choice but to try and invoke Article 5 for the German government at that point, because imagine how badly that would go in Germany for the people who are in charge in the Bundestag right now. They would watch 30 Germans get obliterated in a market in the middle of Munich, literally wiped off the face of the earth, the concrete smeared with their blood from an Iranian IRBM, and then they just choose not to do anything about it. I mean, that wouldn't go over well in Germany. Whoever would be in charge of the country at that point, Louis Merz, would probably end up getting removed from his position or be forced to resign because they chose not to react. That wouldn't go over well. Whenever a country gets directly attacked and a decent amount of people end up getting killed as a result, if that happens, you have no other choice but to go to war, because now it's a defensive war. And at that point, Germany would have a very easy way of getting everybody in NATO to agree to invoke Article 5 for their common defense, because Iran just conducted an unsolicited attack on them that ended up killing a large amount of people. So I would say that, like, if people don't end up dying and they end up shooting down the incoming missiles, like with the Aegis Ashores that we have in Europe, probably nothing will come out of it. If one of those missiles do make it through, however, and they hit something important and they end up killing some people in any NATO country, they are most likely going to invoke Article 5 over that. But given how the air defenses went in Turkey when Iran tried to attack the U.S. forces at the Incirlik air base, and we shot down the missiles and Turkey's reaction was fairly mild, I would assume that a lot of European states would also have a fairly mild reaction if something was fired over them and they shot it down and it didn't result in any casualties or fatalities. They probably wouldn't do anything in response but say, we strongly condemn what Iran just did. That was so mean of them to try and do that. Tisk, 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 and that'll be about it. But moving us on out of that, we have also been able to hear, outside of Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, that within Lebanon, the Israelis are getting busy. The Israelis have been conducting airstrikes across the entirety of the country today, throughout the whole of southern Lebanon, and also throughout the entirety of the areas of the Baalbek valleys and the valleys near Mount Hermon, which are near to the area of the Syrian border, as this post stated right here, with 5 Israeli airstrikes landing incredibly close to the Syrian border and possible supply lines that Hezbollah.
And we actually talked about, and I rephrased, and let me backtrack my comments from last night. I said the Iranians was attacking Lebanon. I meant Israel, not Iran. Like I said before, if I actually make a mistake, I'm going to be the first one to come in here and let y'all know. I just caught that I actually said that last night. I apologize, and I meant to say Israel was conducting strikes on Beirut, Lebanon, and a few other cities and towns that Hezbollah was actually supposed to be stand or based at. So, and plus some of their anti-aircraft weapons and some of their missile launchers, because Hezbollah does have a lot of missile batteries to launch missiles. So we're going to see where it goes. We're going to keep you posted. Let's get back to the news. Oh yeah, just to let y'all know, call lines are open. We had a call last night. If you are watching tonight, you can call back in tonight. I'm more than welcome. Call lines are open. Call lines are only open, excuse me, while the show is live. That's 540-251-7687. Please feel free to give a call, give a shout out, or talk about the show. So they're saying that Ukraine mid-range strikes campaign is causing havoc to multiple critical Russian supply routes deep behind the front of southern Ukraine this month. Numerous Russian military transports has been hit on the E105, M14, and H20 highways connected Rostov to Crimea. So, as of right now, I mean, Russia is not even resupplying their units as of right now because they can't even get supplies to them because of all the airstrikes and drone attacks that's going on in southern Russia. So, we're going to see how this unfolds because the past week has been the most, well, yeah, the most strikes I've seen Ukraine do to Russia in the whole war. I mean, this is like Russia attacking Ukraine at the very beginning of the war. If y'all remember that, like, it's massive. Like hundreds and hundreds of drones and cruise missiles, the Flamingo missile that they have, and I'm sure they probably already developed other missiles as well. But anyways.
Has that now run into Syria. We can also see some more pictures here of the air strikes that were conducted in the area of the Lebanon Valley as well in that picture. We also were able to... I told the president when I was in English, and they said, next time in Moscow. Well, it looks like there will never be a next time. And like the light was striking out the window behind him. He looks like a demon up there.
We would like to come out and say that Mother Nature is a beach, but Russia is not a beach. It's Mother Nature. Screw Mother Nature. Yeah.
Man, watch it here in a little bit. They're going to say, we have to announce the unfortunate death of a Russian general from his 30th-story apartment because, crazy enough, folks, believe it or not, freak accident. The lightning bolt went through the window while he was standing right at it, zapped him, blew away the glass, and he fell from the 30th floor down to the ground. It's crazy. I know, right?
Oh, no. What they say? Hopefully I didn't say it. But, he gets fried like a chocolate, like a briquette. He fell like a briquette. The poor bastard.
You know, they said that they had the barbecue on his body. It was a tragedy. Like, man, it was a real sad thing. They cooked ribs on top of him. But also, man, like, it's even crazier, man, because if that happened, the Russians would play that up to hell, man, because they'd be trying to cover up the FSB execution that happened in the middle of summer. Man, Pesco would be out there, blitz, like, red-faced, eyes blinking separately while he's trying to blink. He'd be going, these things, they happen from time to time. I mean, bro, he'd be blitzed like that last time we saw him on May 9th, I tell you. But moving aside out of that, we also were able to see that the Ukrainians had more information to report at this moment on the crisis well, not really the crisis, but more so the threat of a possible invasion from the Belarusian territories. We were able to hear that according to Zelensky today, now the Belarusians could also conduct attack on the Volyn, Zhytomyr, and Rivne regions. To show you all these regions and where they are, this is the Zhytomyr Oblast, this is the Rivne Oblast, and the Volyn Oblast, I believe that's the one with Lutsk in it. So this is the farthest west one. So they're saying that everything over here to the west could also be threatened with an invasion. But I do have to tell you that we've heard this one several times over the years. And usually when the Ukrainians catch this sort of thing and they start threatening that they'll obliterate the Belarusians if they try and pull a stunt like that, they usually back off, and we've never seen them try an invasion in the west because logistically that'd be damn near impossible to support for the Russians militarily at this point, or the Belarusians even on their own home soil. We also were able to hear that according to Ukrainian intelligence, and this is probably the best news we've got, an offensive from Belarus is possible no earlier than autumn. So at this moment they're expecting that the offensive would happen at some point in the autumn at the earliest, which means that it's either going to be happening in the frigid cold of the winter, or it's going to be happening in the Rasputitsa season of the fall, where the ground is completely impassable to any sort of a vehicle because they'll sink right into the mud. So it looks like from what the Ukrainians are saying right now, while they could conduct an attack from Belarusian territory, it's not going to be happening anytime in the summer, which is the perfect time for them to try and conduct an offensive like that to get some ground before the Rasputitsa sets in. They would be conducting the offensive in the middle of the Rasputitsa or in the winter weather, which both of those conditions are not ideal for any sort of an offensive. At best, their best case scenario is starting at the very late spring, which would be right now, because the ground is finally solidifying from the first Rasputitsa in the spring, and that would be giving them the longest window of fair weather to work with to be able to conduct an offensive before the next Rasputitsa sets in the fall. But apparently, according to Ukrainian intelligence, the best the Russians could pull off, or the Belarusians could pull off, is the autumn, which is a very unideal sort of season to conduct an offensive in. And also on top of that, even if it succeeds, you're immediately going into the winter, which slows down combat operations to a crawl for the larger part. We also were able to hear that according to some Ukrainian officials, including the foreign minister Andrei Sibia, he stated that U.S. brokered talks with Russia are gradually reaching the point of exhaustion, which everybody obviously knew because the Russians cannot be negotiated with. Moving us on out of that, we've also been able to see in the location unknowns today something else: the return of the war donkey. Bliet. Look at him. Majestic.
Oh man, a war donkey. Oh, look at that, that donkey was just dragging that dude around like he was just a rag doll. Oh, he's trying to get rid of his other donkey.
Man, they are friends, I suppose. Or more than friends. Perhaps like a...
Oh, damn. Oh, my goodness. I thought this only happened amongst the Russian soldiers.
I tell you, man, like, I've never seen, I've never seen something like that in my life, I tell you, folks. But, yeah, it looks like the donkeys are getting more action than the Russian army at this point. Oh, man, that's tough right there. Real tough. Oh, man, I'm telling you. I get no respect around here. I went to the front lines. They sat there and told me that I get plenty of women. I sat there and watched the donkey get more than I got. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Oh, man, I get no respect around here. But aside from that, we also were able to see that the Russian casualty report came out for the day. And sadly, there were no Bobcats. But we did...
Oh, damn. They didn't get a single one. Zero. That's what they say. Zero.
It's a tragedy, really. I mean, it's so sad. We had so many days, folks, where there was at least one Bobcat getting destroyed, but it just seems like the streak was broken today. What can I say, folks? It's an unfortunate thing. But moving aside from that, Mississippi Security Records did state that the actual is one tank lost, a total of 11,944 is correct, and missing is 4 ground robotic complexes which were lost, which sadly we haven't seen that added to the Kyiv Independence infographic yet. But over the course of the past 24 hours, 880 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed, along with 3 APCs, 135 supply trucks, 1 main battle tank, 57 artillery pieces, 1,872 drones, 1 MLRS, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. All in all, it was a pretty decent day for losses. Now, once we enter the front, y'all will see why. Moving us on down into the Lehman area, we did get to see some Ukrainian forces in the 63rd Mechanized Brigade conducting some clearing operations. Oh, chat music. Oh, let's mute that.
Oh, bro, they're playing that American rap music in the background. They can't do that. That's not permissible.
Oh my god, this guy had a TKM and just was spraying down a room to clear. Look at that. Dude, that is crazy.
Man, he just tore down all the walls, the concretes, and everything. That poor house will need a renovation now.
We also see the Ukrainians in ghillie suits hopping out their BTR-4 and beginning building clearing operations around the town of Lehman as the Ukrainians are trying to slowly push the Russians back in this area. The Battle of the Severonsky Force has been going on since the beginning of the war, funnily enough, literally since September 2022, and about 3.5 years later, the Russians are still fighting over this little stretch of ground leading to Lehman and into the Severonsky Forest. And the Ukrainians are in the process of pushing them back for about the 3rd time, I believe.
I love how the Ukrainians, when they clear a house, they just like put the gun around the corner, spray, and then they walk on through. It's like putting like pest control pesticides in there, something like that. Sure, it's clear, and they just walk on through.
Yeah, man, they said, excuse me, I have to fuck the room. And then they start laying down like a machine gun in there. It's something else. Really, it's pretty impressive to watch. Because while the Ukrainians don't conduct a lot of infantry on infantry battles these days to try and cut down on casualties, when they do, they are more than well experienced at this point. They probably get some of the best forces in the United States around for their money with the amount of experience that they have on the front. We also able to see near the Bakhmut area, a Ukrainian drone attacked a Russian supply vehicle from a Russian POV on his bike. Let's watch. Oh, what's that? I know something. Oh.
So quick, you couldn't even process it mentally. That came in so quick.
Look at this. Damn, he didn't even go 200 miles an hour.
Yeah, with one moving that fast, I don't think they have a chance to get away with that thing. Like, you can't react to that.
Man, I don't think you can. Like, dang. This guy's like,
is that a new fast racing drone that Ukraine has? You know, the new fast ones that go like ultra quick?
Maybe. Yeah, it is actually. See, it's basically kind of like a plane almost.
Yeah, that's the fact that they use to physically intercept some of those larger drones. Like Shotheads will use these to physically intercept them. But yeah, it looks like they have a warhead to them and start using them to hit.
Man, honestly, that's insane the speed. I mean, that's like a little hellfire, basically.
Yeah, I would say so. That's remarkable. Also, apparently, it can carry a hell of a payload. I mean, look at the explosion.
Yeah, I mean, look at the effort. Once this guy pulls up to it, there's little pieces floating around and everything.
Man, did you hear this guy when he first got even? He's in pure shock.
Right, he lost the ability to speak. He's like, damn, dude, that's rough. We should look around. Oh, there's a vehicle up there. It appears to careen off the road and into that tree line, or they may be running into a tree. It's hard to tell from this distance.
This guy's never going to check on his comrades.
He said, damn, they might be dead, and then just slowly walks out. It's like, nobody's the check, you know, like whatever, I guess. But aside from that clip, which is pretty nuts to see, we also see in constant communication that the Ukrainian armed forces were continuing to shoot out Russian ambush drones. Check these guys out. We see one here with Bren 2, a CZ Bren 2. He's just popping at that little Russian drone up there in the net. We also see this Ukrainian APC pass by with an artillery piece. We also see this guy playing on an ambush drone and shooting in the street. And also another ambush drone. Ambush drones become a very common tactic on both sides. The tactic requires for them to fly the drone out, land it in a spot, and then wait for a vehicle to pass by. Once the vehicle passes by, the drone takes off and then chases down the vehicle and hits it from the rear. It's been a very common tactic over the past year from especially the Russians, but the Ukrainians have started catching on and are usually able to shoot them and destroy them before the vehicle is hit or destroyed. We also were able to see them in the cross area as well. 108th Mechanized Brigade of the Da Vinci unit, rest in peace to Da Vinci, I believe he died in 2023. But we were able to see here they were continuing to drop bombs on Russian positions on the northern flank of the cross battlefield. You see them dropping bombs in a minute. I'll show a compilation of all of them blowing up. And here's a compilation of them blowing up. Quite a lot of explosives in those bombs.
I would say so. They're literally digging a hole in the ground here, like getting rid of this. Well, yeah, the number of us are healing that.
Opa, boy. I don't think these are usable bunkers anymore. I think this is what's called an open air trench, maybe even a patio.
Yeah, it's a junk pile now.
Man, a landfill, like the Russians are used to.
It's a field land, yeah.
Man, you know, they always say the Russians live off land. Now they say the Russians live under land.
It's a new way of life. It's called going underground for safety.
For personal safety. We like to emulate the actions of our great president, Vladimir Putin. We like to go on the ground and like there for the entirety of the war until someone tries to blow us up.
It's a really remarkable thing, Leon. It's a remarkable thing. That's the best.
In the meantime, the Ukrainians are getting their supplies provided to them via Ukraine Eats, which is a shoot-off of other companies that are similar to that name. The little UGVs are basically the only vehicles these days that can resupply Ukrainian units. And we actually, this one here is, before we get the name, we actually see the Russians had an ambush FPV sitting right here behind this burnt-out APC that's now trying to destroy the UGV. So what the UGV is about to do is something impressive. Something straight out passenger stops. It stops. And then they whip that sick Tokyo drift. Oh
my goodness. Oh my god. Hey, a couple eyeballs looking at it too.
Look at this. Oh my god. That's unbelievable. And the UGV, it goes back in its way.
He's a lot tougher than civilian. Oh, come on, bro. They didn't do that. He's one of the Ukrainian outfits. Come on, that's cheesy.
I'm not gonna lie though, man. I mean, that is pretty hilarious, bro. They really broke that thing's thing. Bro, I can't believe you would think the drone would be able to like psych out the UGV and eventually hit it. Crazy enough though, the Ukrainians with a ground drone outmaneuvered an ambush FPV, which had every advantage they could have in every way over this thing, and they still ended up juking it. That's actually crazy. Moving on out of the cross front, and moving on down to the area of Udine, or specifically what's now being called the Novorossiysk front and the Melitopol front. We were able to see the 422nd Regiment of the Luftwaffe was also hunting down Russian logistics behind the lines. They got actually kind of trip going on here. But anyways, we can see them targeting this Russian supply truck here. 18-wheeler. Or is it called a semi? A Buhanka? They use the AI zoom and enhance here to really show you what's underneath. Was that a Kubelwagen? Dude, that's a freaking Kubelwagen.
Oh my god, man. It really is. It was obscured by this like cheap camo netting up here. That is actually one of those. That's unbelievable. I wonder where they got their hands on that.
Bro, honestly, man, I think it was a UAZ 469 because these are actually AI kind of like zoom and enhance things they're doing right here. And I think that the AI mistook the UAZ 469 for a Kubelwagen. I mean, they do look kind of similar though.
What the hell of a switch in with that, damn.
Bro, the AI thought it was 1943 again. Bro, they're fighting the battle of Kursk. Oh my god, it's literally a Kubelwagen.
Oh man, it's all the peanut butter now. Luftwaffe for a little old artifact.
Bro, oh my god. Also, let me pull up a Kubelwagen for y'all really quickly to show you, and then let me pull the UAZ 469 so that way to show you what I think it was probably looking at. There's also something else it could have been, but this is what the AI apparently mistook the vehicle to be, which is this thing. Oh, hold up, I got the wrong one. The Kubelwagen right here. But what it probably was a UAZ 469, or it could have been, and this one's one of the memes. The guy is 69. Nice. He said it. It could have been this because this looks a lot like that. So the AI mistook one of these to be a Kubelwagen. The German, the Russians are definitely not using Kubelwagens. They're antiques, and there's hardly any of them left. There weren't a lot of them made in the first place. But anyways, moving us on to that hilarious AI misinterpretation, we also get to see that apparently a Buhanka, UAZ 469 Buhanka, is now like a Ford Sprinter Man as well. Like this AI is kind of messing up all over the place. Now see this civilian car. Looks like kind of like a Vauxhall. I'll see this UAZ 469 here as well. So this one got right actually. Oh, bro, I mean, they're getting like a little man in there.
Man, I'll tell you, this is a minivan.
Yeah, minivan in a minivan. Bleed. We also see them hitting a D30, and now they're going for some comms towers in the area. Now see them dropping some bombs like a bomber on the Russian positions. Oh, wow, they actually lined up right on the nail. I can tell you, folks, they're laying down some damage on these Russian forces. It's something else, really, when you watch it. The Luftwaffe, it's quite effective, you know? I feel like the Russians are quite familiar with fighting the Luftwaffe. What was it, like 80 years ago? I don't think they were using drones, though. They were using these things called Stokas. And they had these sirens on them that would sound. But that was all of the time. I'm sure these people aren't associated with that. But we can see them here continuing to obliterate Russian positions. All of these, by the way, are around the area of the Melitopol and Novorossiysk front. Because from what we know, the Luftwaffe drone unit kind of straddles the line between those two fronts. So these strikes are coming from that broader area of the periphery of both flanks on that front. But moving us on out of these clips. Moving us on out of these clips because the rest of them are just striking Russian static positions. We also got to see that near the area of the Melitopol front for precision strikes to be conducted by the 226 TDS brigades drones on the Russians within this area. So they have a little cosmic
TDS?
Yes, the
TDS brigade.
They hate me for no reason. They hate me. I don't know why, but we did get to see them dropping some bombs down there. Really teaching natives. You know, if they were flying over the Russians and dropping poop on it, it'd be like that one meme that was put on Truth Social. Crickets. We can see them continuing to target and hit the Russian forces. Yeah, just like that. It was just like that. But it wasn't really there. It was just in my mind. But we also got to see them striking this ambush drone the Russians had sitting out in the open. Boom, and it's gone. They said the explosive. It is a loss. And like I said, we did a worm buster clip. I haven't seen a worm buster clip in a hot minute, actually. I wish I had some, but sadly we just don't. And also, Madyar has completely dropped the whole car antenna thing, so we don't even have that to really show anymore, sadly. That's how much time has passed since the beginning of this war, that we went from that being in commonality, and really groundbreaking when Madyar's birds first came into being, to now Madyar doesn't even do the videos anymore, and it's basically just given that most of the war is drone-based. And look at that crappy Russian drone. That's fiber optic, by the way, if y'all were wondering. But they're going to blow up, so it won't really matter all too much. And about being, dang, they turn into confetti, like, dang!
They're giving it to them, look at them.
Man, I tell you, they give them the lefts and the rights. The Ukrainians, they don't take political sides there. They leave the lefts and rights. We also able to see the Russian air defenses being destroyed in this area as well. Now, I have to tell you, folks, this is from a broader area. I had to put near Zaporizhia, from this from Crimea and Zaporizhia. So here's the clip with that in mind. You see them making their way around the Russian air defenses. Oh, looks like they found a couple. Found a lot, actually. Damn. Oh, look, there goes an air defense missile. And another one. They seem to be missing. Oh, that one just got blown up. There goes a radar. That looks to be... That's a Tunguska. That's a Tor. And also... Oh, that one's about to slam down. Another Tor. Another Tor. So that's 3 Tors. Radar for an S-400. Another Tor. Radar for a Buke. A Buke M3 launcher. Another Tor. Another S-400 radar. Another Buke TEL-AR. And another radar. And another 2 Tors. Damn, I don't think the Russians have any Tors left after today. This is every single Tor in existence getting nuked in one go. say the Russian air defense is having a tough break down there in Zaporizhia and Crimea. Tough times. But
Burning out.
man, burning out, drinking liquor, acting crazy and silly. I don't even care no more. But moving aside from that, it is time for us to get on up to Kyiv and cover the speech from the President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, here on day 1550 of the news from around the world. And Zelensky out there in